Right now, secret agreement. Trump and Putin made a deal that will blow up the world. Decisive meeting, Zelensky in Washington. Trump did the unthinkable. Need to hear. Moscow strikes Baku. Hellish mess. Putin's new SVO. Belarus rushed into attack. Threat of nuclear strike. Something terrible is coming. A deadly blow to the Kremlin. Ukraine has launched killer missiles. The footage will shock you. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Urgent! The shocking meeting between Putin and Trump has shaken the USA. America's political elite has exploded. But the most horrifying truth was left off camera. A deadly pact. What are Putin and Trump hiding? What global upheavals await the world? Watch the details of this secret deal right now.
The echo of what happened in Alaska has reached Washington. After failed negotiations with Putin, Donald Trump meets with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
I'm genuinely worried that next week Donald Trump might try to unfairly blame President Zelensky. He'll likely portray him as a warmonger, even though everyone clearly knows it's President Putin.
Many rightly fear a repeat of the conflict between the leaders of Ukraine and the US that occurred in February of this year. Ukrainian and European diplomacy are working to ensure that, within the walls of the White House, Europe becomes a pillar of support for Ukraine. Along with Volodymyr Zelensky, several European leaders are also heading to Washington for the visit.
Europe is sending in the heavy artillery to Washington together with the president of Ukraine to support Kyiv. European leaders are doing everything they can to prevent a conflict in the Oval Office at this critical stage of diplomatic negotiations aimed at ending Russia's war with Ukraine.
The plan is for the European leaders, specifically Trump's favorites, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to prevent an Oval Office 2.0 conflict.
Trump's style, his moods, his swings, Trump's ups and downs are very noticeable, by the way, especially in his approaches to ending the Russia-Ukraine war. One moment Trump advocates for a ceasefire, then he leans toward comprehensive peace agreements, and then he's back to calling for a ceasefire again. Now, once again under Putin's influence, he is supporting the idea of a comprehensive peace agreement. That's Trump for you. These mood swings and fluctuations are, unfortunately, one of his defining traits.
The negotiations in Alaska, followed by the reaction of European leaders, showed that Putin is not inclined toward peace talks. The dictator speaks in ultimatums, trying to shift the responsibility for the continuation of hostilities onto Ukraine.
Trump supports a plan to cede territories in exchange for peace in Ukraine. After meeting with the Russian president, President Trump told European leaders that he now supports handing over territories under Ukrainian control to Russia, in order to end the fighting.
According to media reports, in addition to the voluntary transfer of Donbas territories controlled by Ukraine, the Russian dictator is demanding official status for the Russian language, the right for the Russian Orthodox Church to operate freely, recognition of Russian sovereignty over Crimea, and the lifting of some sanctions. In essence, there are no concessions or changes from the Russian side.
Unfortunately, this meeting and communication with Putin have influenced Trump's assessments and approaches to the further negotiation process and the conditions for ending the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Ukraine's task, with Europe's support, is to open the eyes of the US president. Among other things, in Alaska, Putin wounded Trump's pride.
Sometimes Trump's moods get the better of his logic, but at the same time, Trump always wants to appear as a winner. He can't allow himself.
A big day at the White House. Trump writes that he has never before hosted so many European leaders at once. And Zelensky even announced that he had already arrived in Washington.
That's why it's necessary to ceasefire and quickly work on the final agreements. We will discuss this in Washington. Putin doesn't want to stop the killing, but he has to.
It is reported that the bilateral meeting between Trump and Zelensky will begin at 2015 Kyiv time.
The pace of events is just extremely high. But at the same time, there's another side to the coin. With such rapid dynamics and with circumstances that haven't fully taken shape yet, circumstances that, let's say, do push towards such meetings, it's essentially just the will of one side. That's why we see few results from such quick meetings.
Trump also refused to hold joint talks with European leaders, so at first there will be a one-on-one conversation with Zelensky, and at 22 choice there will be a multilateral meeting.
The results of today's cascade of meetings will be partly public and partly private, but they will definitely bring Europe and Ukraine closer together in shaping a common framework for European security, which is of interest to both Ukraine and Europe. But accordingly, this could also bring a political result closer for the President of the United States himself, Trump.
Nevertheless, what can we say about Trump's position? Although, in fact, he wrote it himself on his social network.
Zelensky can instantly end the war with Russia if he wants to, or he can choose to keep fighting. No return of Crimea, which Obama gave away 12 years ago without a shot being fired, and no NATO membership for Ukraine. Some things never change.
Meanwhile, the Financial Times even reports that Zelensky is ready to compromise and agree to a peaceful settlement of the war along the current front line. But will Russia itself be ready for this?
I have serious doubts that this can be achieved because, as we can see now, even the events at the front, again, just last night, peaceful Ukrainian cities were shelled. Kharkiv, Odessa, Sumy. Both missiles and drones were used. So, Russia is not inclined toward peace, nor toward a ceasefire, and certainly not toward any kind of peace. Russia will continue. Nana Ona is determined to keep fighting or to achieve its goals through political means, through imposing terms of capitulation on Ukraine.
Earlier, it was reported that Trump would like to arrange a trilateral meeting with Zelensky and Putin on August 22nd. But the organization of the meeting itself will only begin if the talks between the President of Ukraine and the President of the United States in Washington are successful.
He will meet with Putin. Now, at the second stage, he is meeting with Zelensky, who is strengthened by the joint position of the Europeans. Well, that's it. And of course, the White House team plans to arrange a trilateral meeting later, once these two visions can be synchronized by the White House in one way or another. But looking ahead, I think we shouldn't expect too much from today's meeting in Washington. The positions are fundamentally different, they are very complicated.
After Zelensky's meeting with European leaders on August 17th in Brussels, the Coalition of the Willing announced that they are ready to deploy deterrence forces in Ukraine after the cessation of hostilities and to protect the skies and the sea. But here's the catch. We've heard this before.
Europe needed to demonstrate, readiness, not just to send political signals, but to make political decisions. Brussels in particular was supposed to show Europe's unity and its willingness to truly assert its geopolitical agency so that Europe and its interests can't simply be ignored. Security priorities.
On August 17th, Trump told European leaders that he was ready to provide Ukraine with American security guarantees, which, according to Witkoff, even Putin agreed to.
And the fact that President Trump signaled security guarantees is much more important to me than what Putin thinks. Because Putin won't provide any security guarantees. Security guarantees mean a strong army. Only Ukraine can provide that. I believe that funding for this army can only be provided by Europe. Weapons for this army should come from our domestic and European production. But there are scarce items that are only available in the United States. All of this, I believe, constitutes security guarantees.
Russia has set its sights on Europe, the threat of a nuclear strike. Europe itself may soon need security guarantees. During exercises in Belarus, Russia plans to launch a nuclear weapons carrier, the famous Oreshnik. It will reach its target in minutes. Is a new war really coming? Watch.
Russia and Belarus, during their joint exercise Zapad 2025, are planning to practice the use of nuclear weapons and the Oreshnik.
Of course, we plan to work on issues related to planning the use of nuclear weapons. For us, this is an important element of strategic, above all, deterrence. As for the Oreshnik, the head of state has spoken about it more than once. All decisions have been made, the location has been determined, and work is underway. And of course, as part of our Zapad exercise, together with our Russian colleagues, we will also work on planning the use of this type of weapon.
An interesting statement, considering that just a month ago, both Putin and Lukashenko said that the first Oreshnik installation might only appear in Belarus at the end of the year.
The first thing I want to say in this regard, we have produced the first serial Oreshnik complex, the first serial missile. Yes. And it has been delivered to the troops. Now the series has started. First, second, our specialists, as well as Belarusian and Russian military specialists, have chosen a site for the future positions. Work is currently underway to prepare these positions. So, most likely, we will resolve this issue by the end of the year.
Well, we're not rushing, we're doing things calmly. There's no need to try to get ahead of ourselves. We both understand perfectly well that even if they have gone into serial production, as Putin said during that meeting on the bench, it has only just happened, literally just now. So in other words, there aren't and won't be any large quantities of this Oreshnik, because again, our intelligence and our military experts say that this is more of a one-off production.
There are actually a lot of stories connected to the Oreshnik and Belarus, all coming from Lukashenko himself. At one point, he didn't know that the components were being made in Belarus, and then Lukashenko boasted that he would personally decide when to press the button.
You probably noticed that my one condition for Putin was this. We in Belarus will determine the targets, not the Russians. But you'll help us operate it since we don't know how yet. So we'll be pressing the button together, God forbid if it ever comes to that. But we will be the ones to determine the targets.
He agreed. On the one hand, the first task is being accomplished, an internal propaganda one. Look, we're surrounded by enemies, but we have a very powerful weapon called Oreshnik. So don't be afraid and stick with me, with Lukashenko, and everything will be fine for you. And the second propaganda objective is aimed at the external audience, which the Belarusians are now carrying out, essentially trying to scare Western countries.
The most interesting thing is that the upcoming Zapad 2025 exercise is being presented as very safe and even peace-loving.
There are currently more than 30 military attaché representatives in our country, including from 9 NATO countries. They will also have the opportunity. We are inviting all of them to observe our exercises. In doing so, we once again emphasize our peaceful intentions and openness and show that we truly want to reduce the military tension which, unfortunately, we see and feel. As they say, we are taking the first step.
Even Lukashenko himself directly refuted the rumors about where that supposed attack was being prepared from.
We proved to all of them that we are not planning to attack you and that we will be conducting the exercises in the center, deep inside Belarus.
For what purpose?
The exercises?
So changes in the plans for the exercises.
So that you don't have, as I already said, any reason to further accuse us of being aggressors, of planning to attack at the very least the countries of Eastern Europe, Poland, the Baltic states, and especially Ukraine. On the contrary, I would interpret this interview and Lukashenko's shifted emphasis as actual evidence that such an operation is being prepared by the Russians and that in no way, so to speak, have they abandoned or retreated from carrying it out.
As for the Oreshnik, they started, as the saying goes, on a high note, boasting that it is the most innovative and deadly weapon. They threatened to wipe out the entire West with it. And everyone can see how it ended, with isolated public statements and zero real results.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Sensations, a deadly blow for Putin. Ukraine has launched mass production of killer missiles. And for the enemy, Ukrainian fighters have eliminated a dozen occupiers. You have to see this footage. And there's more news. Here's the peace deal Zelensky proposed to Trump. All the details coming up.
Twice as powerful as the legendary American Tomahawks, Ukraine has begun mass production of Flamingo cruise missiles with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. Online, the new development was immediately compared to the FP5 cruise missile project.
The main advantage of this cruise missile is that it is a Ukrainian development, and accordingly, the Ukrainian military and political leadership will no longer need to ask our strategic partners, the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom, for permission to strike targets on the territory of the Russian Federation for strictly military purposes. Now, this prerogative belongs exclusively to the Ukrainian military and political leadership.
But while the missiles are still in production, the Ukrainian armed forces are destroying the enemy by other means. Special Operations Forces soldiers carried out a sweep of enemy positions. As a result of the battle, most of the occupiers were eliminated and several others surrendered. It was loud as well in temporarily occupied Melitopol. As a result of a GUR operation, an ammunition depot belonging to the Russian invaders was destroyed. Along with it, at least 6 Russian Marines were sent to the next world. According to US Secretary of State Mark Rubio, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed up to 20,000 Russian soldiers just in the past month, although in reality more than 30,000 have already gone to meet Kobzon. Meanwhile, the situation at the front remains tense. Russia is preparing for new offensive actions. According to Sirsky, the enemy is currently regrouping and focusing on 2 main directions, Pokrovsk and Zaporizhzhia.
At the moment, the most problematic situation is in the Pokrovsk direction and accordingly in the Konstantinovka area. The occupiers are trying to take control of the main industrial cities in the Donetsk region. These are the Pokrovsk agglomeration and the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the occupiers will use further advances into Ukrainian territory as an element of military political pressure.
At the same time, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine noted that Russian claims about their ability to wage war for years do not correspond to reality and are merely bravado.
At the moment, the budget deficit of the Russian Federation is about $60 billion, according to Russian economists. According to the same economists, by the end of the year, the hole in the Russian budget will amount to approximately 100 billion. And accordingly, the ability to finance active combat operations in Ukraine is decreasing proportionally.
Nevertheless, Syrskyi added that even in the event of a frozen conflict or the signing of a peace agreement, Ukraine must constantly focus on developing its own defense capabilities and be ready to repel the Russian occupiers. By the way, the coalition of the Resolute has declared its readiness to deploy deterrence forces in Ukraine after the war ends.
The coalition brings together our strategic European partners, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and a number of other countries. First and foremost, this refers to the possibility of deploying a so-called contingent on Ukrainian territory to prevent further escalation scenarios from the Russian Federation. However, such scenarios are being considered purely theoretically, not practically.
No matter what anyone says about peace agreements, Ukraine is once again in flames. Putin's occupiers deliberately targeted the civilian population. In the evening of August 17th, the Russian army struck a residential building in the industrial district of Kharkiv with a ballistic missile. Later that night, the city was attacked by strike UAVs, and as a result of the shelling, there are dead and wounded, including children.
At this very moment, Russia has erupted, the number of strikes has skyrocketed, and explosions are shaking the entire country. Ukraine is finishing off the Kremlin, or the armed forces of Ukraine will destroy the entire Russian military-industrial complex. Will Ukraine be able to deliver a fatal blow to Russia's military industry? What does this mean for Putin?
Are they flying?
Where are they flying to?
Fires at factories and closed airports. This is how August began in Russia. Intensity and effectiveness. Every single day, Ukrainian armed forces consistently strike Russian military targets or defense industry enterprises and subsequently report successful attacks on unique and significant defense plants located within Russia. These attacks have exposed problems in Russia's military-industrial complex and caused panic among Russians. Thanks to Ukraine's defense forces, the only Russian plant producing helium for missiles in Orenburg was hit. Local residents reported a series of explosions and the M5 highway was blocked. The Orenburg helium plant processes up to 15 billion cubic meters of gas per year and produces helium, which is critically important for rocket engineering, as well as the space and aviation industries. Helium plays a key role in rocket launches. This plant is a vital facility for the Russian military-industrial complex, which is directly involved in the aggression against Ukraine. In Yaroslavl, a major fire mysteriously broke out in the building of a paint and varnish company that produces materials for Russia's military-industrial complex. Another strategically important enterprise was attacked in Tatarstan. The distance from the state border with Ukraine is more than 1,000 kilometers. UAVs reached the workshops in Yelabuga. Here, on the territory of Alabuga, is the headquarters of the company that manufactures combat drones.
In this case,
2024, the plant significantly expanded the production of strike and reconnaissance drones of Iranian design, using Chinese components and employing Russian teenagers for the work. The defense forces made it an explosive night for Stavropol Monocrystal. Monocrystal specializes in the chemical industry. It produces synthetic sapphire for optoelectronics, which is used in military equipment.
There it goes, there it goes. They hit the oil depot.
Monocrystal also produces silicon carbide, which is used in armor, protection, radars, and military electronics. Monocrystal fulfills state defense orders for the Russian Federation. Eyewitnesses recorded smoke on the factory grounds. Official authorities confirmed the drone threat, but did not provide information about damage to the plant. In Arzamas, Ukrainian drones attacked a device manufacturing plant.
One of the country's leading enterprises in the defense industrial complex with a 60-year history. The plant produces devices for the aviation, missile, and space industries.
The Arzamas plant manufactures gyroscopic instruments, control systems, onboard computers, as well as key components for the Kh-32 and Kh-101 cruise missiles. In 2020, the plant was awarded the National Golden Idea Prize in the field of military technical cooperation. The plant is under sanctions from the US and the European Union. Before the successful attack, a post appeared on the Vysota resource dedicated to news of the defense industry, stating that the plant had acquired new equipment. Now, the press service of the Arzamas instrument building plant is sending out letters in public forums demanding that the attack not be reported, even threatening consequences. Russian defense industry enterprises working for the war against Ukraine are absolutely legitimate military targets. Successful attacks by Ukrainian forces help reduce the military capabilities of the aggressor country's army. The work of demilitarizing facilities that produce weapons for terrorizing peaceful Ukrainian cities continues and is becoming increasingly intense.
A shameful failure for Putin. In 1,010 days, they have captured less than 1% of the territory. Since the end of 2022, the enemy has not stopped its attacks, but thanks to devastating strikes, the Ukrainian armed forces have managed to reclaim vast territories. How did Putin's army fail, and where are the Ukrainian armed forces breaking the enemy's backbone? What is happening on the front right now, and how is Ukraine exhausting the enemy's last reserves? Watch the report.
The long-awaited counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces has begun. Our defenders have launched an offensive in the Sumy region. The advance of Ukrainian troops is being recorded in the Slobozansk direction. The defense forces have recaptured at least 2.5 kilometers of territory from the occupiers, according to the General Staff of Ukraine. This allowed the Ukrainian armed forces to establish full fire control over the enemy's logistical routes. As a result, the delivery of ammunition, evacuation of Russian troops, and reinforcement of Russian forces with reserves have all been disrupted. As a result, intense fighting is currently taking place near the villages of Alexeyevka and Yunakovka, where the enemy is retreating, albeit slowly.
In the northern Slobozhansky direction, Ukrainian forces continue active operations to destroy the enemy and liberate our settlements. In particular, active operations are underway in the areas of Alexeyevka and Yunakovka in the Sumy region. The struggle continues. Glory to Ukraine.
However, the occupiers are still hoping to break through the Ukrainian defenses somewhere. For the first time in a long while, the Russians launched a tank assault on Kupiansk. But the operation failed. The Ukrainian armed forces put up a fierce resistance. And even though the occupiers threw their tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and infantry into the battle, everything was fair. the enemy was spotted on the left bank of the Askil River, specifically in the direction of Lyman-Pershi-Kupiansk. There, the enemy tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses using 2 tanks and 3 armored fighting vehicles. However, the Ukrainian armed forces put up a worthy resistance, damaging and destroying the equipment and also eliminating almost all of the Russian personnel.
Basically, these are the preliminary results so far. It seems that the situation with this breakthrough has now been contained. Gradually, they are pushing the enemy back, that is, reclaiming the territory. And
Ukrainian tanks are hitting the occupiers without missing. In one of the settlements in the Donetsk region, where the 3rd Army Corps is holding the line, our tank broke through the enemy's defenses almost effortlessly. Despite an FPV drone strike on the armor, the Ukrainian armed forces vehicle quickly took up position and opened fire on the enemy at point-blank range. As a result, the crew managed to complete their mission and promptly return to their position without any losses. And here we see the work of the Forepost Brigade's UAV operators. Their drone precisely struck enemy equipment and personnel in the Vovchansk direction. After the strike, the enemy suffered losses and was forced to abandon their position. Even well-fortified enemy positions do not save the Russian army from Ukrainian drones. This is how the aerial reconnaissance pilots detected the movement of an enemy tank and pinpointed its hiding place. In 2 passes, the enemy equipment was destroyed. The first drone tore off the camouflage net, and the second struck the enemy IFV directly. The occupiers simply had no chance to escape. Our defenders dominate the skies. In the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to bring down at least 4 enemy strike and reconnaissance UAVs. As a result, against the backdrop of real failures at the front, the occupiers have resorted to the Kremlin's favorite tactic of fake victories. Russian army soldiers are filming staged videos about the capture of settlements. Thus, Russian propaganda is actively employing a new tactic of spreading disinformation, staged victories to create the illusion of success at the front. To do this, the enemy sends small groups carrying Russian flags to bypass the positions of Ukrainian defenders. Some of them manage to infiltrate certain settlements and film short videos allegedly proving the capture of new territories. Such videos are used for triumphant reports to the Kremlin leadership and are spread in the media to put pressure on Ukrainian society. But incidents like these are something Kremlin propaganda tries to keep quiet about. For example, last night drones attacked the Lysky railway station in the Voronezh region. As can be seen from eyewitness videos, a fire broke out at the site upon impact. The governor of the Voronezh region, albeit reluctantly, confirmed the drone attack several hours after the incident, noting that as a result of drone debris falling, a power line at the railway station was damaged and train movements were delayed. This concerns the Lysky station, which is considered one of the largest railway hubs of the Southeastern Railway of the Russian Federation.